14th, 2016. Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha. Is this thing too loud? The sound, is it too loud? Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so today I said we will take 2 suttas, and this time I promise that we will cover both suttas. Because the first one is the one that I skipped over a few weeks ago, so we'll come back to that. And this is very short, just 3 pages, and it's a lot of repetition, and very simple. Okay, so this is called the Nagaravindeyya Sutta. It's Sutta number 150 in the middle-length discourses, beginning on page 1140. Okay, so the sutta begins when the Buddha has been wandering in the state of Kosala, and he comes to a village named Nagaravindeyya. Okay, then apparently it's a brahmin village, and so it says that the brahmin householders of Nagaravindeyya heard that the Buddha has come to them, and then they decide to come to see him. And so they go to the Buddha, some pay homage, some just do the anjali, respectful salutation, others exchange greetings with him, and some just sit down silently on one side. Okay, then the people of Nagaravindeyya ask the Buddha a question. So he says, I'm sorry, the Buddha addresses them and says, householders, if wanderers of other sects ask you this, what kind of recluses and brahmins should not be honored, respected, revered, and venerated? You should answer them thus. Before we come to the answer, I just have to fill in a little bit about the background to the time of the Buddha. So I've gone through this before, but in the Buddha's time there was a large, very, very diverse communities, a large number with very, very diverse communities of ascetics and Brahmin wanderers, Brahmins who did not live the household life, but belonged to renunciate communities. And there was a great diversity in the philosophies that underlie these different sects of ascetics, different types of spiritual practices. And so for an observer on the Indian scene of that time, it would have been very, very confusing to know who is truly holy and worthy of veneration. Like there would be some ascetics who would just let their hair grow very, very long, never cutting it, and then they would put it up on the top of their heads in a coil on top of the head with long flowing beards. Others would have their hair in matted locks. Others, of course, would shave the hair and beard. Some would be wearing ochre robes or orange-colored robes, similar to this. Others wore white robes. Others went around completely, some with just loincloths, others completely naked. Some would cover the bodies with ashes. Yeah, if you want to get some idea of what India might have been like in the Buddha's time, you could actually see it on YouTube. I'm not saying this jokingly. There is a festival that takes place in India every 12 years. It's called the Kumbh Mela. So you can search for this on YouTube. It takes place every 12 years at a particular auspicious astrological conjunction or astrological configuration. I think it comes in the middle of February, but I'm not so sure. Probably the full moon in the month of February. At Allahabad, it's the place where the Ganges and I think it's the Yamuna River meet. And it's considered to be an extremely sort of auspicious place, a holy place. And when the Kumbh Mela takes place, all the different ascetics, sannyasis, swamis, renunciants, brahmins from all over India come and they converge for the Kumbh Mela. And so you could see what all of the different great variety of sects would have been like in the time of the Buddha. And the big feature in the Kumbh Mela is that the naked ascetics, they're called Nagas. You see, what takes place at the Kumbh Mela at exactly the right astrological time, everybody is supposed to go into the Ganges River to bathe, to take a dip in the Ganges, because that's exactly at that moment, that's the time when one is supposed to be able to wash off all of one's past sins and impurities and get many blessings from the Ganges. And the ones who lead the descent into the Ganges are the Nagas, the naked ascetics. Usually they live in the Himalayan mountains, but they come down especially for this very auspicious event. When I saw it on YouTube, I thought maybe I would like to see what that's like in person. But I think the last one was held in 2014, and it's held once every 12 years. And so when the next one takes place, I'll be in my 80s. I don't know whether I could take it. Yeah, and of all of these different sects, probably the most outrageous from our point of view is a sect, I think they're called the Kapatikas. It's one of the branches of the naked ascetics. Their specialty is to flaunt all the conventional rules and expectations of decent behavior. And so, of course, they go naked, they'll shout at people, abuse them, not because they're angry, but it's a way to, to express their particular vision of the world. And the idea is to get people to retaliate and strike back at you, so then you can practice developing equanimity towards those situations, towards provocative situations. And another of their practices is to live in cemeteries and cremation grounds. I think they carry a skull with the top cut off, and they use the skull as their begging bowl. So they collect their food in the skull and eat out of the skull. And then they go to sleep at night in the cemetery, cremation ground, and they say that they even eat excrement. But there's very, very deep philosophy underlying this. You see, the underlying philosophical vision is that everything is brahmin, that is the divine. Like everything is the ultimate spiritual reality. So if everything is the ultimate divine reality, then how do we distinguish, I like my nice rice and curries prepared with delicious spices, but I don't like to eat excrement. I'll sleep in a nice bed, but I'm afraid of the sleep in the cemetery. I like to be praised and spoken to politely, but I don't like other people to abuse me. But if one really has a highly developed mind, one should be able to regard everything the same. And if one regards everything the same, then one should be able to act on the basis of that spiritual vision. And that's why you can do everything that the worldly convention regards as being taboo, prohibited, repulsive. One does it. And breaking down these false discriminations, false distinctions, and in that way, the belief is that you could realize the divine ultimate reality of everything. For myself, I don't think I need that deep philosophy. I'll take just a simpler point of view. Okay, so anyway, when people observe all of these different ascetics and renunciants and sannyasis with their different garments, the different outfits, different appearances, different practices, the question comes, which one of these are really holy and saintly, and which are just deluded or even humbug, putting on humbug? And so just like that, a question can arise in the mind of an Indian villager today, it would have arisen in the minds of Indian people back in the days of the Buddha. So they want to know what kind of ascetics and brahmins should not be honored, respected, revered, and venerated. And then the Buddha gives them the answer. And he says, those recluses and brahmins who are not rid of lust, hate, and delusion regarding forms cognizable by the eye, whose minds are not inwardly peaceful, and who conduct themselves now righteously, now unrighteously, in body, speech, and mind. So these ascetics and brahmins should not be honored, respected, revered, and venerated. And why is that? And this is the way the householders should think. Because we ourselves are not rid of lust, hate, and delusion regarding forms cognizable by the eye. Our minds are not inwardly peaceful, and we conduct ourselves now righteously, now unrighteously, in body, speech, and mind. And so we do not see any higher righteous conduct on the part of those good recluses and brahmins. So they should not be honored, respected, revered, and venerated. Okay, then the same thing is repeated for each of the other sense modalities. Okay, then comes the positive side. So if wanderers of other sects ask you, householders, what kind of recluses and brahmins should be honored, respected, revered, and venerated, you should answer them thus. And it's interesting here that the Buddha doesn't say you should tell them, we think it's the disciples of the recluse Gautama, of the Buddha, who should be honored, revered, and venerated. So the Buddha is not setting up a criterion, these are my disciples, therefore you should honor and venerate them. But rather he's setting out, you might call this an objective set of criteria. And so he says, the answer is that those recluses and brahmins who are rid of lust, hate, and delusion regarding forms cognizable by the eye, whose minds are inwardly peaceful, and who conduct themselves righteously in body, speech, and mind, such recluses and brahmins should be honored, respected, revered, and venerated. And it strikes me here, though I don't think even the commentary says this, the text doesn't say it, but it seems that these criteria set out here could be distinguished in terms of the three trainings in moral conduct, samadhi or concentration, and wisdom, though here they would appear in reverse order. So we say that those ascetics and brahmins who are rid of lust, hate, and delusion regarding forms cognizable by the eye, since it's the function of wisdom to cut off lust, hatred, and delusion, so we'd say that this represents the training in wisdom. And then whose minds are inwardly peaceful, and since it's the task of the training in samadhi, or concentration, to make the mind calm and peaceful, we could say that this implies the training in samadhi. And then the third phrase that's used, who conduct themselves righteously in body, speech, and mind, those are the marks or characteristics of good behavior or ethical behavior. And so this can be taken to represent the training in sila, in virtuous behavior. Okay, so these are the recluses and brahmins who should be honored, respected, revered, and venerated. And so it's setting up as the highest standard those who have, who have completed the three trainings in virtue, concentration, and wisdom. But also, though the sutta doesn't, at this point, it doesn't say that explicitly, but I would also say that those should be venerated, at least in a provisional way, who are engaged in the training in good behavior, samadhi, and wisdom, even if they haven't perfected those trainings. So, for example, you might see Buddhist monks and nuns. Sometimes, the behavior, it's not perfect, they have their human faults, but you shouldn't bring in this text and then say, so I see some traces, this one eats a bit too much, so they're not free of greed, this one gets angry from time to time, this one seems to be a little bit restless, this one, their behavior is a little bit off, and therefore they're not worthy of respect. But if you know that they've actually undertaken the training in sila, samadhi, and panya, and are at least most of the time engaged in that training, then you should consider that indeed that they are worthy of respect. Not yet the highest veneration, but as renunciants who have undertaken a spiritual discipline, then you should consider they're worthy of respect. And also I would say the same goes to ascetics, priests, monks from other spiritual traditions. Don't think only the Buddhist monks and nuns are worthy of respect, but those who have undertaken any kind of training that helps to cultivate conduct and to develop the good qualities of the mind. Okay, so what is the reason why these ascetics and brahmins are worthy of veneration and respect? And this is the way they reflect: because we ourselves are not rid of lust, hate, and delusion regarding forms cognizable by the eye. Our minds are not inwardly peaceful, and we conduct ourselves sometimes righteously, sometimes unrighteously, in body, speech, and mind. And since we see higher righteous conduct on the part of those good recluses and brahmins, they should be honored, respected, revered, and venerated. Okay, then basically the same pattern is repeated, or the same passage is repeated for each of the other sense modalities. Okay, so then we come to paragraph 6. Okay, if wanderers of other sects ask you, what are your reasons and what is your evidence regarding those venerable ones, whereby you say about them, surely those venerable ones are either rid of lust or are practicing for the removal of lust, either rid of hate or are practicing for the removal of hate, either rid of delusion or are practicing for the removal of delusion. You see, here the statement has a wider scope than the previous one, whereas the previous one says that those who are worthy of respect are those who have eliminated lust, hate, and delusion. Here it says either those who have eliminated them or those who are practicing for the elimination of them. Okay, so what is your evidence for making this claim? And so this is the answer that should be given. It is because those venerable ones resort to remote jungle thicket resting places, or dwelling places in the forest. For there are no forms cognizable by the eye there of a kind that they could look at and delight in. No sounds cognizable by the ear, no odors cognizable by the nose, no flavors cognizable by the tongue, no tactile or textures cognizable by the body that they could touch and delight in. These are our reasons, that is our evidence, why we say that surely these venerable ones are either rid of lust, hate, and delusion, or are practicing for their removal. It's a little narrow, the scope of this particular passage, in that there are monastics who are not always living, in remote forest dwelling places, but also they can be living in villages, towns, cities, and still practicing for the removal of lust, hate, and delusion. But still there's a big difference between living in the forest or the countryside and living in the middle of the city. Just yesterday I had to go into New York City to see a dentist, and the contrast between being here and taking the Metro North into Grand Central Station and then having to get onto the subway at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 3:30 in the afternoon, streams of people coming by, so that it's almost difficult to move from one point to another. Okay, so then when the Buddha gives this answer, then the householders of Nagaravindeyya say, magnificent Master Gautama, magnificent Master Gautama. Then they go for refuge to the Buddha, to the Dhamma, to the Sangha. Okay, so that is the sutta. Are there any questions or comments?
I was questioning going into the remote jungle thicket.
Wait, take the microphone.
I was questioning going into the remote jungle thicket and not having any kind of pleasures. I would find even the sun on my back would be a pleasure, or listening to the birds. I know there would be fearful things going on there, but there are still some pleasures there.
Actually,
now, people pay a lot of money to go and find.
Actually, it is quite pleasant living in the forest, because you do get beautiful forest scenery, and as you say, the singing of the birds, and and when the trees are flowering, there can be the breezes bringing the sweet scents from the wildflowers and flowers in the trees. But those are what I would call pure pleasures. They're not the pleasures that provoke, even though they come through the senses, but they're not the pleasures that provoke lust.
Yeah, okay. So like if I'm in my own yard and it's really pretty, I'm still kind of greedy and clinging to it. But if I go into the woods or the jungle, there's really nothing much you can cling to there other than, I mean, you can't think about it too much, you can just appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But really, the basis of clinging is the mind rather than the objective environment. So while living in the forest is more congenial to renunciation and detachment.
True.
But as long as there is the disposition to clinging, the mind can find anything to cling to.
But I think less so in the jungle.
Less so, but what I found to be particularly the case with monks living in forest monasteries, the clinging attaches itself to particular ways of doing things. So one monk might have a preferred routine of doing things in a particular way, and then say if the abbot of the forest monastery decides to change the routine, and one is attached to a particular schedule for arranging one's daily activities, and the routine is changed, then there comes a resistance to that, and it provokes anger. I was told that Ajahn Chah, though I didn't live with Ajahn Chah, I was not his pupil in any way, but I was told that he would regularly change the schedule at his monastery so that the monks, this is what I heard from a French monk who had lived with Ajahn Chah, he told me that they all got comfortable to knowing that this was the time where you do your morning chanting, then you have your morning meditation this period, you have a certain free time, you can do your yoga or do your reading, whatever. So they would get sort of comfortably settled into that routine, and taking it for granted, then Ajahn Chah would come out one day and say, okay, now we're going to do the morning chanting at this time, and we'll have a work period during my yoga period. And then it would set all of the monks, or at least some of them, their minds would go into a state of agitation. How are we going to deal with this? And it would be, the purpose of Ajahn Chah was to reflect back to the monks the way that they had become attached to particular routines.
But maybe there's less of a sense of self in the jungle also that could promote peaceful thinking.
The sense of self, of course, can thrive anywhere.
Yeah.
And that sense of self, it sort of manifests itself in the form of this clinging to preferred routines.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, Tina. Wait, you take the microphone.
I'm sorry to be off the topic a little, but you talked about the Nagas. And at the end of our class, we always chant and we bless the Nagas.
Yeah.
I'm interested, is that the same Nagas?
No, it's a different word. It's a different word.
Oh, it is?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, how would you spell it? Do you spell it differently, or it's a...
I'm not sure how the Naga, which are the dragon spirits, that is the N long...
N-A-G-A? No.
Yeah, but the first A is the long A. The Naga, who are the ascetics, it might be spelled the same way, but I think it must be a different word. I assume it's a different word. And I think the original word could have been in Sanskrit Nagga, N-A-G-G-A, which is related, you could see the connection with the English word naked. You know, it basically comes from the same origins. But I think the word nug, the old Sanskrit word naga, it might have gotten conflated with the word naga, you know, meaning the dragon spirits. And so now they call them nagas with the long A. But they're not the same thing by any means. Okay, then, Tsering, yeah.
Bhante, is going back to your questions on the practice of these yogis coming on that event where all the yogis come, and their practice of unconventional things like...
Some are, most of them are quite conventional, but there are some who...
Very unconventional.
Yeah.
Now, in the Buddhist, we have practices to get rid of hatred, desire, and illusions. Doesn't those yogis' practices also lead towards that?
I would say that they're aiming for that. Though maybe they have a different, that they conceive, particularly delusion or ignorance, they will conceive differently, and so they'll conceive wisdom differently. But certainly the more moderate yogis and sannyasis are also aiming in some way at overcoming greed, hatred, and delusion.
Right, Bhante. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand this passage, only that in that shouldn't the mind training that the Buddha is teaching, it's uprooting these sort of defilements within the mind, so shouldn't they work irrespective of the physical location one is in?
I didn't quite... Say again?
What I don't understand about this passage is that it's saying that these sages should be revered because they're in a place that essentially offers no temptation.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, well, if one trains the mind, one's uprooting these defilements irrespective of one's location.
Yeah.
So I'm confused about the passage.
That there are different, this is interesting, that there are different perspectives that come through in the Buddhist text. Like there are some passages where the Buddha says that it doesn't matter whether one is living in the forest or in the village, that one should still be training the mind to overcome greed, hatred, and delusion. But still, I say that the majority of passages advocate the forest as a more ideal place, a more suitable place especially for undertaking the practice of meditation, because it's remote from a lot of activities, a lot of sensory provocative phenomena, and it's quiet. It's a quiet place, silent place, and so it's more congenial to the practice. Okay, I want to move on to the other sutta now.